Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, in association with Road to Perdition author Max Allan Collins, brings you the upcoming audio drama, crowdfunded, True Noir, the Nathan Heller casebooks, based on Mr. Collins' 19-volume series about a Chicago private detective turned private eye to the stars, played by actor Todd Stashwick. You loved him as Captain Liam Shaw in Picard Season 3, and you hated him as the Deacon in the 12 Monkeys TV series. He stars in this upcoming audio drama. Look at it, or look for it, at a crowdfunding campaign near you. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination and the maybe never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I am coming to you from the Robservatory, and I am Robcasting at you for this, the 924th episode of Robservations. And by the way, I'll just say it right now. Yes, I know that Rob Liefeld also does a Robservations show. When I named this show, I forgot that Rob Liefeld actually used to write a column in Wizard magazine back in the 90s called Robservations. I might have changed the name, might have. And I know we have opposing points of view sometimes or whatever, but let me tell you, Rob Liefeld is one of my favorite people that I've ever met, because this is now 2024. 30 years ago in 1994, the Image Comics creators stormed the San Diego Comic-Con. They were like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones all combined into one, but they were comic creators. And Rob Liefeld brought a Youngblood spaceship to Comic-Con, like a full-size spaceship that you could get into. And it was a couple of years ago, not a couple of years ago, I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. Someone would have to fact check me on this. But Playboy threw a party at the San Diego Comic-Con. And I had met Rob a couple times. I was later on, John Schnepp and I had him on Collider Heroes. And I stopped him. And I said, bruh, you got to tell me the story of how'd you make that Youngblood spaceship and how did you get it to Comic-Con? And he told me the story. And first of all, if you meet Rob Liefeld in person, the man defines the word infectious. His personality is infectious. He told me the tale. And the girl I was dating at the time, we were in stitches. We were dying. And I'm hoping for the 1000th episode of Robservations that we have that team up. I'm going to reach out to him because I want to do a pre-recorded interview with him about this, and I want him to tell this story again because, goddamn, it was so funny. And, you know, I'm a huge fan. Like, I don't care what people say about Rob Liefeld's art. I loved it. The first time I saw it was in the Hawk and Dove miniseries from DC. And you know what? No one had ever drawn the way he drew. Now people can disparage him however they want, but I'll tell you something about his work. The first time I ever saw it in that comic book, there was nothing, no one else drew like him. His line work was different than anyone else. And the thing was, it was all like cool. Like every frame was coming at you, and it was awesome. And now I wasn't sitting there grading his anatomy. If I wanted to look at great superhero anatomy, I'd look at one of my favorite artists, which is George Perez. I think George Perez, you know, John Byrne as well. But Rob Liefeld, you could tell he was a young artist. But he exploded out, and I was always like, why are people disparaging of him? Because no one draws like him. Now I understand it's artwork, like one of my favorite comic artists, Bill Sienkiewicz might be my favorite comic artist of all time, maybe. Howard Chaykin's American Flag. I mean, you know, I have a lot of great or favorite comic artists, but it's like, you know, when I first saw Rob Liefeld's work, I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know how young he was, but I've always loved Rob Liefeld. I'm a Rob Liefeld fan. You know, because he does his thing. Rob Liefeld is always being Rob Liefeld, and kudos to him. Hopefully, I can get him to be on the 1000th episode of Robservations. I hope so. The Robservations team up. The universes come together. Not like Scissor Sisters, but come together, you know, in a different way. Wait, did I just say that? Scissor Sisters, you know, the band. Jake Shears. Mary. Come on, you know. I love the Scissor Sisters. Oops. Anyway, so the first thing I wanted to discuss was a story, speaking of comics. I found this story today. So, meet the Ballsy Art Professor students tried and failed to cancel. As many of you know, I am a fan of art. I'm a fan of all kinds of art. And if you go back and you look at what, say, the Nazis tried to do, was get rid of art. Degenerate art. And if you want to watch it in film terms, look at the Burt Lancaster film, The Train, directed by John Frankenheimer, one of his 60s bangers. If you want to see a film director that you might not know a lot about, you need to delve into John Frankenheimer's oeuvre of 60s movies. They're black and white, so put your prejudices aside about black and white. Jump in. Birdman of Alcatraz, 7 Days in May, Seconds, The Manchurian Candidate, and The Train. I'm just saying, all of them are bangers. All of them are worth watching. I know they're black and white. They might not be your thing, but I'm telling you, Seconds is one of my favorite science fiction movies. Manchurian Candidate is one of my favorite political thriller movies. The Train is just an adventure movie. Birdman of Alcatraz is kind of it's the Shawshank Redemption before the Shawshank Redemption. And Seconds, did I say it was one of my favorite science fiction films? Did I say that? Shot by the great James Wong Howe? I'm just saying. Anyway, so this article, speaking of comics, was really interesting. Now, this was in thecollegefix.com. Don't know this website. Don't think I ever went there, but this was written back in July 1st of 2022. But I didn't see it until today. And it was about an artist that you might have known about if you've seen American Splendor. Well, that's Harvey Pekar. R. Crumb, a tenured University of Michigan associate professor in the School of Art and Design, survived an onslaught of allegations that she engaged in repeated microaggressions against her students, forcing them to copy racist and misogynist cartoons without providing trigger warnings or context. Phoebe Glecker, pictured, severely hot, a professor specializing in comics, had faced complaints from students distraught that her curriculum involves provocative cartoons from artists such as R. Crumb, a seminal figure in the underground comics movement. Some students had filed complaints with the school in the fall of 2020 and the winter of 2021 that Crumb's comics are misogynistic and racially insensitive. And Glecker was forcing them to study the images, according to a June 25th investigative article in the Michigan Daily. Although the investigation is closed and Glockner, Glockner, was fully cleared and still teaches, the article reignited debate about her curriculum and teaching methods. She stands by them. Comics are, by nature, a provocative art form, Glockner told the College Fix in an emailed statement. Some comics reflect fantasy worlds that reveal our desires, dreams, and nightmares. Other comics offer a grotesque reflection of humanity that we would rather not see. Glockner gained, let's say Gleckner. I think it's Gleckner. I don't know. Gained national fame from her own 2002 graphic novel, Diary of a Teenage Girl, which was made into a movie in 2015. She has taught at U of M since 2004. I would say that gives her some credibility. Students express their discomfort toward being assigned homework on an artist that is known for drawing racist cartoons, one complaint read, referring to Crumb. Students expressed their discomfort toward the depiction of the female body in the illustration as they felt it was misogynistic and uncomfortable to draw. After the students complained, Gleckner required them to watch a documentary on R. Crumb, implying that our discomfort towards misogyny and racism is something to be fixed. I don't care if she likes R. Crumb, one student told the paper. It was more the fact that she was like, you guys must like it, and if you don't like it, there's going to be consequences. And there were consequences. Brad Smith, Associate Dean of Academic Programs for the School of Art and Design, told The Daily that the complaints against Glockner are effectively a closed matter. The administration of the Stamp School of Art and Design responded to the concerns shared by students in 2020 and 2021 through established processes regarding such issues, Smith told the paper. As this is a personal matter, university policy limits the information we are able to share. The students had alleged that when they told Glockner content presented in class was racist or misogynistic, Glockner would answer with, "But is it though?" They allege this answer is constantly invalidating the experience of marginalized groups. They argued she should not embed racism and misogyny in her curriculum for the class because it results in curriculum-based trauma. Glockner told The Fix she stands behind her decisions. My focus as an educator is to introduce students to making comics while offering a survey of comics history and contemporary comics practice, Glockner said. I encourage students to express their resistance to content constructively in a manner that invites criticism. It is my job to teach comics and the challenging topics they confront us with while respecting each and every one of my students as individuals. That's what I do every day. Glockner's own art, pictured, reflects her taste for provocation. The samples of art provided on her school website represent an enthusiasm for an anatomical drawing with sexual themes included. My own work as a graphic novelist has often led to uncomfortable conversations and the impulse for some to look away, Glockner told The Fix. I've dealt with themes of sexuality, emotional and physical violence, and the thin membrane that encloses each of us as individuals, and yet is so permeable that we are all inextricably connected, interdependent, wounded or nourished by the cruelness or generosity of the societies that produced us. In addition to her changing curriculum, the students had also charged Glockner with microaggressive behavior in class. Towards the end of class, Phoebe asked us all to smile for her, even though it was evident that we were all tired and upset by her microaggressions throughout the class, the complaint reads. I would also call this an act of aggression towards us. We do not owe her any performative emotions. The students further alleged that Glockner failed to pronounce the last name of a Latina student and later confused two Latina students for one another, saying, I just thought you were the same person because you were both Mexican. 3 former students also spoke about their experience with Glockner with the Michigan Daily. One anonymous student who goes by they-them pronouns told the Daily that Glockner had continuously misgendered them in class. I encourage my students to bravely and honestly confront whatever topics, themes, or questions they chose to explore in their own work, Glockner told The Fix. On a personal note, I absolutely support every one of my students, regardless of the ways they might define themselves, including pronouns, to be the individuals that they are as they work to find and develop their creative voice. Another student had alleged that after a tarot card reading at Glockner's private cottage, Glockner whispered, "You're a dog," in their ear, then kissed the student on the face. Glockner called the allegations simply outrageous and absolutely untrue. The complaints were already examined by the University of Michigan, and the university decided to close the matter over a year and a half ago, Glockner told the college Fix. Now, why do I think this is important to read? Once again, when you go to college and you study, say, human history, the entirety of human history is a litany of horror. Human beings were never nice to each other. We are the most racist, misogynistic, horrible creatures that nature ever conjured up in the primordial soup of this planet. Whatever you believe, I don't think that you can deny that human beings are awful, 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 awful people. And to delve into the work of artists or anybody that has to reflect our culture, looking at anyone's going to be full of microaggressions. You're going to get uncomfortable. You're going to be made angry. Why? Because we're fucking horrible. There is no bright, shiny rainbow in human history. And when someone like R. Crumb, one of the great, counterculture figures in the comic world in the 60s and 70s, I mean, my God, I was telling Mike Bodden this morning, I'm like, I used to show people Fritz the Cat, which was based on underground comics, and it was an X-rated cartoon, and I would show my friends this when we were like 14, 15, 16, watching something transgressive. By the way, Fritz the Cat, released on VHS by Warner Home Video. I mean, it's amazing to me that ideas that we can't, like, you need to take for granted that we're horrible people. Human beings are horrible. There was never a time when there wasn't microaggressions. There was never a time when we weren't trying to exterminate one group or another. So I don't understand why anybody who's in college, who's delving into history, especially the history of art, gets upset when a teacher brings somebody, especially a comic artist, someone who made a graphic novel herself, starts delving into underground comics. I mean, the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. I mean, hell, I'm going to tell you, Omaha the Cat Dancer. That was a furry comic. It was very sexy. I mean, these are real things that exist. We act like, I don't understand. I just don't get. Why do I keep reading stories about how, whether it's college students or people older or younger, or people come after me and say, this person's hateful or that person, I'm like, compared to what? What rainbow? What are you living in the chest that the gold used to be in under whatever rainbow you, look, here's the thing. I think that we all have to, as Quado said to Quaid in Total Recall, open your mind, Quaid. Whether that was real or a dream. I mean, we all have to be open-minded. Now, that doesn't mean you have to immediately reject horrible thoughts, microaggressions, or whatever. What I want, what I expect, I mean, my God, when you look into the cosmic void, every time the James Webb telescope gives us more information, I feel that much smaller. I mean, we should be astonished that we exist at all, and everybody's worried about their own, and I get it. I understand. But anyway, I just wanted to share that article because I found it today. I did tweet it out. I thought it was interesting. I know it's from 2022, but still, it just was like, my God, someone's mad at someone for sharing R. Crumb's work. I mean, I would think, here's the thing, if a teacher were to share a comic artist like R. Crumb, the first thing I would do is go to Wikipedia and the internet and type in R. Crumb and read everything there was to know about him. I wouldn't be offended by his work. I would understand that was the work he did at the time he did it in. Why did he do the work he did? Why? And why does my teacher feel the need to share his work with us? There must be a reason. And I would try and come up with don't just get offended, be like, don't do that. Try and figure out what's happening here. Why did your teacher, who's a graphic novelist herself, why did she choose to share this artist's work? And look into that artist's background. Find out about their lives. What are they doing? I don't understand why people don't do that. Everyone's got computers in class. If a teacher is like, Google search. I mean, and figure it out and go, oh, okay, I understand. Maybe I don't agree with this person and maybe I'm microaggressed upon. But clearly the teacher feels it important, and I paid to go to this college. I paid to go to this college because this college has teachers like her. So rather than me make it about me, I'm upset. Oh my God, I don't feel good. I'm microaggressed upon. Instead of that, why not stop and think, okay, I worked my entire life up to this point to get accepted to this college. I wanted to go to this school because they have the kind of professors I want to learn from. So why isn't the benefit of the doubt ever given to the faculty? Why would you get mad at the very professors that you not only worked your ass off to get into that college, but when they say something that you don't like, why do you get to even have an opinion? You have paid to go there, to hear from the professors that are teaching you. So why don't they get the benefit of the doubt? Maybe they know something you don't. That's why you go to college. I don't know. Just thinking. I don't know. Anyway, this was not the subject at hand. This is not what I want to talk about. First of all, before I start on the subject at hand, I'd like to give a shout out to the new subscribers to this channel. Fred T, Lola Bunny 087, James Ricciuti, I think. Bernard Valentini, Talented Productions, but talented is like a talent. DL, Ryan Budney, Cliff Allure, Sherman 1971, Goose 6014, Timmy Cole, and Master Tubing, to be or not to be. Garrett Groover says, Rob, I'm curious. How do you organize or store your physical media? Is it by format, genre, alphabetically, etc.? A good question from Garrett Groover. Garrett, I will tell you this. You have to understand, this is my philosophy. It's always alphabetical. The doesn't count. If it's the Shawshank Redemption, it goes under S for Shawshank. It's alphabetical. Why? Because if other people come into your collection and come in and look to pick a movie, if in their minds they have something specific and they want to go to that, they know the title of that, and they know if it's alphabetical. I even have little plastic, like in a library, that have letters that stick out. That said, I've started to change that up with special editions. Like some people put all their Criterion discs, like, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's not streaming, but it's Criterion. It's not 4K, but this would be filed under all. I strictly alphabetical. However, I'm getting, in my old age, there are some companies that I think deserve special. I mean, Criterion, I've been buying by the way, 2024 is the 40th anniversary of Criterion. Their first two releases, I said this yesterday on Let's Get Physical Media, were King Kong and Citizen Kane on CAV Laserdisc. So Criterion's been around for 40 years this year. This is their 40th anniversary. So some people put all their Criterion titles together. But the thing is, most people won't know that. So that's why, I've got older people coming in. Elizabeth comes in. If someone wants, or her friends come in, if they want to find a movie, I put it alphabetically is the easiest way to file films. I know collectors, I want to put all my Criterion titles together. I will say this, Second Sight, the Second Sight company out of the UK, which is one of my favorite. The first Second Sight, it's funny because I was thinking about this. I make the joke that if Second Sight was a girl, Second Sight would be Holly, Farrah Fawcett Major's character from Logan's Run. take that as you would. But I mean, I do love how Second Sight packages their stuff. But even I didn't realize that the first Second Sight disc I bought was Betty Blue, like 10 years ago, maybe actually 12 years ago, because they offered the theatrical version and Jean-Jacques Benet's extended version, which I'd never seen. Criterion has subsequently put it out again, but anyway, I love Second Sight. 1001 Johnny says, shit, how did I miss you streaming tonight, Rob? Well, did you? I don't know. I don't think you did, sir, because you sent that in. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So let's get to the task at hand. Let's get to the subject matter at hand. I know this is a rambling call, and you never know what's going to happen here, but let's just jump into it, as Philip DeFranco says. So I have been thinking. Right? I've been thinking a lot about the philosophical difference between streaming and not. But by the way, let me just Dan Step the cat. Wait, hang on. Let me. He says, I don't want to massacre your name. Says this, dude. Why can't I? There's some craziness happening. Here we go, dude. I just disagree with you about Nerdrotic. You can be completely right about his character. I hope this tip you take it to heart. Of course. And by the way, this is your first tip you've ever sent me live. Here's the thing. So I have no problem saying this. I'm a big fan of Gary Beekler, aka Nerdrotic. I consider him a friend. I really like him. I've met his wife. He's incredibly generous to his fan base. He puts on these events and buys everyone drinks and tacos and all this. Now, is he a firebrand? Sure, he is. But I look at Gary Beekler and I think of him as a San Francisco counterculture punk coming from the same school as someone like R. Crumb. And I think that if you actually watch his content, like I really appreciated this Rings of Power video he put out. Yeah. Does he demand, is he abrasive? Yeah. Does he go for the jugular? Yeah. And can he be seen as being a firebrand? Yeah. Gary Beekler is the punk rock version of a YouTube pundit. That's what he is. And if movies like Repo Man or Sid and Nancy come to mind. But really, he's also an old softy. But what I like about Gary Beekler's content recently is once a week, usually on Monday, he puts out like a 15-minute video that he writes himself and that he has editors work on. And whether you like him or not, those videos are really well put together. And I appreciate the intellect that goes on behind them, both Gary's own writing and his editorial staff. Now, are they provocative? Yes. Are they designed to inflame? Certainly. But are they wrong? Maybe his presentational style might not be to everyone's taste, but I would say this, they're quality content. And here's the thing, you don't have to like him, but I appreciate the fact that he does some good work. Whether you agree or disagree, that's what political discourse is in this country, or any kind of discourse. We all need to learn to, your knee-jerk reaction might be to dislike somebody, and I completely respect that. However, if you dislike somebody, I think it's important to understand why you dislike them. I don't believe that a lot of people even listen to somebody enough to know why they dislike them. They see things and it's a knee-jerk reaction, and sometimes I've discovered that as I've grown up, there are people that I thought I couldn't stand, but sometimes they have very valid points to make, and they make not just valid points, but they might expose me to thoughts I hadn't thought of, or points of view that I didn't believe in, or that I didn't understand, and it causes me to delve into something deeper. So even people that I disagree with, But, you know, the thing about Gary is these videos that he makes that he puts out usually on Mondays, they're worth watching, even if you dislike him personally or you don't like his content or the people he streams with or whatever. Those videos might not be for everyone's taste, but what he says in them is worth listening to. And for me, I usually laugh my ass off because they are irreverent. I mean, it's not my brand, but I still enjoy watching them. And I appreciate the work that he puts into them. And that's all I ask. All I ask of people is before you label somebody and start, you know, hating on anyone, give them a chance and listen to them. And by the way, if you hate them, you need to understand why you hate them, and you can explain exactly why. Like, I don't like this person, and here's why. And give examples. Tell me why you don't like somebody, and make your point. I mean, I wish everybody would have taken high school debate. Hell, I mean, it would have been great. Anyway, but before actually, people are firing in some questions. So it's Danth Step. I want to thank you for writing in and saying that, because I appreciate, first of all, you sent in a super chat. I want to acknowledge that was your first one on the channel. Thank you so much. But I appreciate that you stated your opinion in a constructive manner. This is what this channel is based on. This. Everyone's here to have conversations. And I welcome anyone. I even say to anybody, if you hate my guts or I say something that you completely, vehemently disagree with, please come on the channel and I'll bring you on the channel and we'll have a conversation about it live. I will shut the fuck up. You state your point of view. I'll listen in front of God and all of you, and we will talk about it. But I just appreciate that you came here and you said something. Thank you. And you were respectful and honest. And that, my friend, that's what we need moving forward. We need open dialogue. We need everybody to be able to state their opinions without fear of anything. It doesn't matter what shape, size, color, creed, sexuality, religious belief, political affiliation. It should not matter. If you can state your position clearly and you state it in a way that respects the audience, to understand there's all kinds of people out there, well then, I would be happy to provide a platform to do that. Because by God, first of all, you know what? I've lived around the world, for the most part, people are pretty great. People are pretty great. So thank you for proving that. Blake Layton sends in a super chat and says, I love your wisdom. I don't know about wisdom. But as a fellow fan of great stories, you need to watch the anime Attack on Titan. No, I've seen it. I haven't watched all of it. I've also seen the live action movie. Never seen a show do what they did with the protagonist. Now, I haven't seen all of it. I like Attack on Titan. What I've seen, it's very fascinating. But look, my favorite anime, I have to say this. One of my favorite things, my favorite shows of all time, and I would dare say one of the greatest science fiction space operas, if not the greatest science fiction space opera of all time, is the original OVA Legends of the Galactic Heroes. The original 110 episode OVA series. It's Lord of the Rings meets World War II in space. There's no aliens. But Reinhard von Lohengrin and Yang Wen Li, those characters, that show, if someone gave me a ton of money and said you can make your live action TV show, I'd do Greg Bear's Anvil of Stars, or I'd do Legends of the Galactic Heroes. Legends of the Galactic Heroes is my favorite anime of all time. Now, I know there's a new version out. I know. It's not bad. It's just not the original, which goes back, it took them decades, a decade and a half to finish. And I go back, I spent, when Sentai Filmworks came out with their box set, it was $800. I was like, click, that's how much I love it. Anyway, but Attack on Titan's good, but I should finish it. I mean, I'm more of a Space Battleship Yamato, Star Blazers, Dougram, Macross, Gundam. I love Gundam. I keep going now. So they've started releasing. They've released all the Perfect Grade Gundams over the last 10 years of Perfect Grade Gundams into the American market under Bandai Namco. Every time I go into there's a hobby store I go into to buy paint and stuff, and they have a lot of them, and people aren't buying because they're like $250. I'm like, oh my god, I just want to buy all those Gundam Perfect Grades. Sonny Dominguez, the king of squirting. He's been a member for 31 months. He says, have a chance to check out Film Threat's D-Files regarding employees talking about activists in Disney, South Park, then this, there's smoke or fire. Alan Eng over at Film Threat, who works with Chris Gore, has been doing a great series on the Disney Files. The D-Files, really interesting. Depressing, but interesting, not unexpected. And, Garrett Groover said, should Disney man up and just officially release Song of the South? It's part of their history, whether they want it to exist or not, and it's an Academy Award-winning film. So for those of you who don't know what Song of the South is, it was a 1940s live-action Disney film. It was live-action animation. It dealt with Uncle Remus and Brer Rabbit and all that. And they used to release Song of the South theatrically. The last time Song of the South came out theatrically was in, say it with me now, 1986. Now it's deemed racist, and look, I grew up with Song of the South. I probably saw it 6 times in the theater because I kept going. I loved it. And by the way, I own the Blu-ray. Shh, don't tell anyone. I used to have the Japanese Laserdisc. So it was not something that now it's like, ooh. When I was working for a company called Curdy Pellerin in the early aughts, and we were doing, I worked on the Snow White, the original Snow White DVD that got released. I did a feature length. I directed and edited a feature length documentary on the making of Tron. The first thing I ever worked on was Fantasia. I worked on Emperor's New Groove. I worked on a lot of Disney titles in the early days of DVD, and we actually talked about getting Song of the South released. And our idea was we could get a lot of people like Quincy Jones or Oprah Winfrey to contextualize, because when you would go see Song of the South in the theater, the people that loved it the most were black audiences. And it's interesting. I mean, everyone's like, oh, they can't release it now, but it was a groundbreaking film at the time. But of course, nowadays you can't release that. It's too bad, because I think it's an enjoyable film, and I can watch it whenever I want. But I don't know what that says about me. But yes, Garrett Groover, the question you ask is, look, I think you can release anything. Why should we be afraid of our history? Why? Why are corporations or humanity or people afraid of our history? The fact that we're afraid of our history and we don't want to admit our history is, look up the American-German Bund of the 1930s. Look up that. That was a big part of American history in the 30s, the 20s and 30s. Look up the German-American Bund, B-U-N-D. There's a documentary on the American experience about it. Look that up. Just saying. I'll let you guys, the joy of discovering it yourselves. But let's get into the facts at hand. Let's get into what Trent Skinner, by the way, became a new member of the channel. Thank you, Trent. Very nice of you. Now, what I wanted to talk about, what the show is going to be about, was streaming as opposed to the theatrical experience. And I know, as well as you do, that I have an article to read. 2 articles, actually, from the same place. I've been my new favorite place to go is the Fanfare section of Medium. And I need to start with an article that comes to us from July 5th of 2023. And it was written by, who was it written by? MVW Encyclopedia is the credited writer. MVW Encyclopedia. If you want to follow along, link is in the description of both of these articles. So check them out. Quentin Tarantino's thoughts on streaming are harsh, but right. Quentin Tarantino is widely known not only for his unmistakable style of dialogue and his peculiar love affair with feet. Is that peculiar? But also for his unique and firm opinions regarding cinema. Some of his most resounding and harshly criticized takes include his zealot-like devotion to analog film over digital, his unashamed interest in portraying stylized violence in his movies, and the downright banning of cell phones alongside other intruding devices during set. An undoubtedly controversial figure, unafraid of public backlash, I respect Quentin's brutal honesty when it comes to defining the art form he loves. So unsurprisingly, he came under notable scrutiny recently after his comments on a rather complex subject prevailing in Hollywood. Remember, this comes from July of 2023. For movies, which platform is best nowadays, theatrical or streaming releases? Here are Quentin Tarantino's thoughts about it. I'm not going to do an impression of him. You know, I don't like working on diminishing returns. And I mean, now is a good time because, I mean, what even is a motion picture anymore? Is it just something they show on Apple? That would be diminishing returns. I mean, and I'm not picking on anybody, but apparently for Netflix, Ryan Reynolds has made $50 million on this movie and $50 million on that movie. Well, good for him that he's making so much money. But those movies don't exist in the zeitgeist. It's almost like they don't even exist. In his rather unique style, Tarantino has addressed an issue which should have concerned studios, producers, and directors alike years ago. It should be clear to us that the streaming era of movies is probably here to stay, and that it changed the way we watch movies forever. After all, the advantages of streaming over regular cable TV and even the theatrical releases are notable enough to mention. Convenience, immediacy, optionality. For the first time in history, a viewer can sit whenever they want and watch a movie with no interruptions in a surprisingly good, though not perfect, resolution. No commercial breaks, no cropped up aspect ratios, and more importantly, no censorship in most cases. Even better, a streaming service tends to be an ideal platform for newer and lesser known filmmakers to tell stories that could never see the light of day in a typical theatrical release. Well, that's now. It didn't used to be the case. So far, then, it sounds like Mr. Tarantino probably inhaled too much Eucerin and has lost the plot, right? Not so fast, dear reader. As one of the greatest American directors ever, Quentin Tarantino's insights on the industry should never be ignored, especially when he's got more than a damn good point for his argument. Streaming, without a doubt, provides a substantial amount of benefits for both the audience and the filmmakers involved. Preferring a streaming release tends to save the studios a lot of money. It makes the movies financially more viable to produce, and theoretically it also allows more people to watch it. But Tarantino's concerns do not lie here at all. What he's concerned about primarily is that a Netflix, Hulu, or Amazon release can't hope to be a cultural phenomenon. Streaming movies do not exist in the zeitgeist, right? Look, pictures from Stranger Things. Honestly, it doesn't take much to think of a bunch of counterexamples of artworks displayed on streaming services which have transformed themselves into massive hits. Stranger Things, Peaky Blinders, Yellowstone, Succession, Squid Game, and Better Call Saul are just some of the highly acclaimed artworks produced in the last few years, but you probably have noticed something about all of them. Yep, these aren't movies, they're TV shows, intended as such from the start. Compare that to feature-length movies which are displayed on streaming services. Which one would you consider not only a hit, but a cultural phenomenon on par with the best TV shows out there right now? The Power of the Dog? The Irishman? The Kissing Booth? Beasts of No Nation? Roma? The Vast of Night? Mank? Host? I think the problem gets a lot clearer now. While some of these movies I've mentioned are actually quite good, some of them aren't, though, in my humble opinion. This is the author's, by the way, opinion. None of them have reached the level of attention or respect by both audiences and critics alike than movies released exclusively on theaters. A good example is Extraction, a very good action series which consists of a lot of random shooting and killing. Although it is remarkably well done, people will tend to think about John Wick far earlier than Extraction. Well, why? My hypothesis aligns with Tarantino. It definitely has to do with the fact that John Wick received a proper theatrical release worldwide, and Extraction didn't. Despite the fact that theaters come from one of their worst performing years ever, partially due to COVID and partially due to shitty superhero movies hijacking theaters, it's still more than evident that the theater release still holds its legendary appeal. People look forward to walking into a theater with loved ones and have all their problems dissipate for 2 hours. They love the isolation, the ritualistic nature of it all. The theater provides an experience which cannot be replicated at home. It is an actual social event. Let me put it this way. Do you think films like Avatar: The Way of Water and Top Gun: Maverick would have garnered the same attention if they released straight to Netflix? Of course not. It's ludicrous to think otherwise. A movie watched at the cinema feels much more real and important, and when the hype is there, a movie stops being just a movie, and it becomes an event. It takes a simple Google search for you to realize that movies like Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, Greta Gerwig's Barbie, and Christopher McQuarrie's Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which isn't Part 1 anymore, are already cultural phenomenons, and we haven't even seen them yet. There lies the crucial importance of the theatrical release in cinema. Now that Hollywood has experienced one of the worst performing years they've seen in quite a while, though through no one's fault of their own, I might add. By the way, that's not necessarily true when this was written. $9 billion at the box office in 2023. Not bad. I think it's time to heed Tarantino's warnings. Streaming releases without a doubt have their place for sure, and I'm not radical or snobby enough to call them not proper cinema like so many others, but I do agree that movies intended for streaming have an uphill battle to climb. I just don't see a Netflix movie acquiring the same respect and love from a film released in the theater. I might be wrong, but so far it doesn't look possible. Hopefully, this means the idiots heading the studios understand that people are desperate for good movies. And not only will they lift their fat asses from their seats to watch them, they're actually willing to pay you good money to do so. However, if most theatrical releases continue to be insufferable ChatGPT-written banalities, we might reach a point of no return. You can only fool people for so long. Tarantino has warned us, and we should be listening. By the way, I have a counterpoint. Well, not a counterpoint, an additional article to read, but I wanted to speak about this. So, here's the thing. And again, I'm no psychologist. I'm no brain scientist. I don't know fuck all about human perception and how it works and how it affects the brain. I don't. However, as a human being with a brain, and understanding how my own perception works, I can only speak from my own experience of the world. And I would say this, like when I sit down, and I am a very experienced movie watcher from a long way back. I've seen thousands of films. You know, I started working in a video store when I was 13 in 1980. I mean, I've been ensconced within the movie pundit space. I have loved films for my entire life since I was 5 years old, and I saw War of the Worlds, Byron Haskins' War of the Worlds from 1953. It changed my life. I was already a Star Trek fan. It all happened at the same time. Started watching Star Trek. I started watching The Twilight Zone. I started watching science fiction movies on Sci-Fi Theater on Channel 11 in Seattle, Washington, and I saw all of these things within the same 2 years of each other. I started watching Star Trek. I saw the original Planet of the Apes. I saw War of the Worlds. It changed my life. So I've been a movie fan since I was 5. Studying, thinking about them, parents taking me to the movies. And I will tell you this, I know for a fact, and I'm not a scientist, so I cannot explain why this is the case. But I can tell you this, when you go to a movie, when you actually leave, it's a destination, and you go there, whatever happens in your brain chemistry, what you're thinking about, you've anticipated, you know enough that for me, for movie fans, I used to scour this Friday calendar section of the Seattle Times because we didn't know it was coming out. And I would open stuff up and be like, oh my God, I read about this in Starlog or Cinefantastique or Fangoria. Oh my God. You know, you wouldn't know when they were going to come out. So you'd open and it'd be this thing and you'd see this cornucopia of, look at all these movies. And then you'd have to, as a kid, starting at 10 years old, I used public transportation in Seattle. I started taking the bus everywhere because that's how I could get to a movie, and I didn't have to ask my parents. Yeah, I was 10. My friend Jeff Swafford, he knew all the routes, so we would go. By the time I got to drive when I was 16, I knew where every movie theater was in the greater Seattle area because I'd figured out the bus schedules, I'd gone. But it was a thing. So when you go to a movie, you had to plan it. You had to think about it. You contemplate it. When you got to that theater, and this is pre-social media and all that, when you sat in that theater with all kinds of people of all shapes, size, colors, creeds. Like I said, nobody cared. You didn't, any prejudices you might have, when you went to a movie theater, there was no prejudicial thoughts. You didn't care about what someone's political affiliation was. You didn't care about what their religious beliefs were. You didn't care about what color they were. Nobody gave a fuck. When you went to a movie theater, you were all there for the same reason. The same thing that brought you there, brought these people there. They were immediately your friends. Because all of you, were there for the same reason. For whatever reason, you were there to see that fucking movie. And then the lights went down. Trailers came on. We didn't have commercials back in the day, but trailers came on. Everyone's munching their popcorn. You heard that sound of plastic bag going crunching. It was, it's terrible, but whatever. It didn't matter who or what you were or believed. You were all there for the same reason, and you all knew it. You were all friends at that moment. Everybody was a friend, and you're watching what's on the screen. You're watching it, man. You're watching, and you plan to be there. You had to go there. You had to figure it out. Like how, as a kid, how many buses? Sometimes I had to take 3 or 4 buses to get there. To go to the Grand Cinema, the Grand Illusion Theater in Seattle. I was on Mercer Island. It was four fucking buses to get out there. So when I got to that goddamn theater, that movie better have been fucking good. We planned, but everybody, talk about a unifying force. And I don't know how this works psychologically, but I blinked less, and I know that whatever was going on in my mind, nothing else mattered. The lights came down. Your senses were deprived of anything but was on the screen. That's all that mattered. And you'd watch it. And I'm telling you, I don't care what anyone says. That act of sitting in a theater, opening your mind, again, Quado, open your mind, Quaid. It would seep in, go through your eyes and ears, your senses, and it would burn itself into your brain. You would suck it up. And maybe somebody can do a study on this one day. I don't know if the brain chemistry can even be measured like this, but the idea was that when you were watching a movie, it just, in a theater, there was nothing else. It was just it's going in. I have to believe, because I know for a fact it was like that with me. You would see, whatever was going on. It went all the way to your soul. Now, as much as I like streaming shows, whether it's House of the Dragon, whatever, I was watching, True Detective season 4, which I'm really enjoying. Episode 2 was last night, or recently I watched American Nightmare. Fucking crazy ass story that shit is, and I had read about that before. Or, Sopranos 25th anniversary, going back and watching my favorite Sopranos episodes, all those things, no matter what, when you're watching at home, the fact that I can see the room I'm in, the fact that my dogs come and go, there's distraction, phones ring, whatever. Your mental state is not the same. You are not giving yourself over. You're not giving your soul over to experiencing, and the image is much bigger, no matter how great your home theater system is. As big as when you're seeing it, gigantic. And the thing is, Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino know this. And they know this because, you think about the old Marshall McLuhan idea of the medium is the message. And that is true. And the theatrical experience is something that can't be duplicated. And by the way, even in a cavernous room, experiencing something. Like when you go and watch The Dark Knight, you hear that opening scene, you know, when you see the camera pushes in to Heath Ledger from behind, he's standing there. I mean, that whole sequence shot in IMAX, people forget they showed that sequence, just that opening heist sequence, like 6 months before The Dark Knight came out. And I forget what it was playing in front of, but it was amazing. So the experience of watching a movie in a theater is a very different experience than watching a movie at home. And I knew this. Look, I'd watch movies at home. I've been watching movies at home that I purchased since May of 1980. It was John Carpenter's birthday the other day. The first movie I ever owned was Meta Home Entertainment's version of Halloween. And one of the other 5, then I got 5 other movies, and one of them was VCI's version of Dark Star. So John Carpenter, and by the way, to be honest, I had never seen a John Carpenter movie before I owned them on videotape in 1980. I saw 2, and I became a huge fan. And, you know, then, of course, my dad, the first John Carpenter movie, I did not see The Fog in the theater either because I was 12 and nobody would take me because it was R-rated. But that also came out, I want to say that came out on magnetic video. And the first John Carpenter movie I saw in the theater was in 1981, was Escape from New York. And it was funny because I had to beg, I've said this before on the show, but when I was a kid, I had to beg my parents. I was a movie fanatic. I had to beg my parents to take me. And they had I wouldn't shut up. When I was in Indian Guides, so I get canceled for that now. But my dad, you had to have an Indian name. My dad named me Chief Running Mouth. Go figure. If my dad was alive today, he died in 2008, but he would totally be on the show every night. I would do a show with my dad. My dad was hilarious, and he'd be smoking his cigar. My dad could talk and balance a cigar on his lower lip. I don't know how he did it. It was amazing. But we went and saw Escape from New York. I begged him to take my friends, and it was funny because I'll never forget this. We're in the car, and my dad's taking us to the Crossroads Cinema, and he's like, "So Escape from New York, what is this movie about?" I said, "Well, Dad," and I quoted the tagline that was on the poster. I said, "It's 1997. New York City is a walled maximum security prison. Breaking out is impossible. Breaking in is insane." My dad was like, "Well, that's interesting." So we parked. My dad, what he would do is he'd take his cigar out and he'd put it in his windshield wipers. He'd balance the cigar. He would put it in the windshield wiper and prop it up, and it would just sit there. My dad went and saw the movie with us. I don't know why I'm telling that story. I'm just thinking about my dad, but my dad was a rad dude. His name was Richard. Everyone's like, "Hey, Dick," and he never thought it was funny, but whatever. But it was all good. But seeing those movies in the theater, man, that was the way to do it. It doesn't matter. I love physical media. I love that you can build your home. Actually, people that have real home theaters. I've been in celebrity friends of mine. One in particular has $1 million home theater. It's pretty dope. But when I go there, he never plays it loud enough. And there's always people around that are getting up and go. I'm like, what the fuck, you people? Even it doesn't matter. When you're at home, the etiquette is not the same. You don't have the same mindset. Now, there's another article I want to read from the same website. And let's look into it, shall we? This article is about Willem Dafoe. And actually, this is not the right one. Let's go here. And it's by the same guy, MVW Encyclopedia. Is Willem Dafoe right about watching movies at home? Well, the way we see movies is... Oh, by the way, this was published 17 hours ago. And it referenced the Quentin Tarantino article from back in July, which is why I wanted to share them both. So this is published in Fanfare. That's part of Medium. So you can go, by the way, link to this article right below in the description. The way we see movies is changing, whether we like it or not. The streaming era, where virtually anyone can access hundreds of movies conveniently, easily, and without any interruptions, at the moment at least, has started a proper revolution. Whether you are a film zealot or not, the fact that things have changed forever since Netflix boomed should be acknowledged. Using Quentin Tarantino's perspective on streaming, I've discussed some of the problems behind prioritizing streaming versus the theatrical experience. The comments section got quite interesting and intense over time, arguing both in favor and against. I would like to repeat this incredibly insightful experiment with yet another film legend giving his honest take. This time, the authority in question is the eternally lovely, frightening Willem Dafoe. The American actor is known for his quirky portrayals in anything from superhero flicks to Lars von Trier's hyper-depressive trilogies. None of us can argue that this man is a legend. I'd like to point out that he also plays counterfeiter Rick Masters in William Friedkin's superlative 1985 film To Live and Die in L.A. Just saying. It should come as no surprise that in his recent interview to The Guardian, he was asked about this problem. You can read the entire interview here if you're interested. However, I'll focus solely on his spicy answers regarding this phenomenon. And this is what Willem Dafoe says. People watch films differently now, at home, rather than at the cinemas, which are closing down. Which is tragic because the kind of attention that people give at home isn't the same. More difficult movies, more challenging movies cannot do as well when you don't have an audience that's really paying attention. That's a big thing. I miss the social thing of where movies fit in the world. God bless you, sir. But he is exactly 100%, 1,000%, 1,000,000% correct. I miss the social thing of where movies fit in the world. Another very interesting fragment of Willem's interview mirrors something Michael Cera briefly discussed in an interview. Studios are changing. This is Michael Cera. They aren't making movies the same way they used to. They're being financed by toy companies and other entities, and they become the vehicle to make the movies because they know how to do that. Streaming, they're becoming like a monopoly. They have the means of production and distribution, and so it's very complicated. Finally, I want to highlight a final extract of his interview where he calls out another problem with making movies nowadays. And let's call it, Hollywood is full of a bunch of sissies nowadays. I just noticed that there's a proliferation of middlemen. There aren't ballsy producers like there used to be. There are some savvy ones, but you don't have the same kind of characters that you used to have that would sell their house to make a movie and do crazy things to get it done. They're a little harder to find. As you can hopefully see by now, these bits provide a little more context to see Willem Dafoe's stance on modern filmmaking. And to be fair, he claims he's no expert on the financial side of making films. Either way, I think he's just being humble. His input is quite valuable for the sole reason he's been doing this shit for a long time. Anyway, I was quite surprised with this interview because I'd never thought about streaming that way. Never had it occurred to me that Quentin Tarantino's opinion, movies shown on Netflix do not have the same impact as in the theater, may have to do with this. People who watch movies in the comfort of their own home may not want to be as challenged as theater-loving cinephiles. First of all, I have no idea if this is entirely true or not. As usual, I think the answer may lie right in the middle. Sure, the typical audience member who likes movies but doesn't love them will probably have a hard time convincing themselves to watch Christopher Nolan's Memento after a 14-hour shift at the hospital. I totally understand that. Sometimes I've returned home so tired I couldn't convince myself to sit through a single episode of Friends. The convenience factor in streaming applies both ways. You get a bunch of things to watch. But perhaps this might also mean people can expect films that are easier to digest. If we took Willem's argument at heart, films like Tar, which by the way was my favorite movie of last year, The Banshees of Inisherin, or even Napoleon would struggle tremendously to generate hype within their respective streaming platforms if they never received a theatrical release. Or will they? Challenging movies absolutely exist in streaming catalogs, and some of them have been quite successful. J.A. Bayona's Society of the Snow comes immediately to mind. By the way, that's a great movie. People can't stop talking about that movie. Or how about Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, which also did quite well, despite having a larger runtime than The Big Bang and a rather minimal exposure in theatrical runs. In short, this can happen, but it doesn't happen frequently, but it does happen. Keep in mind, we also have streaming services like Mubi, which focus mainly on auteur films only cinephiles are interested in. As far as I know, they're also doing well enough to keep going. Then again, some people think Christopher Nolan's Tenet flopped as badly as it did because it couldn't have a decent run in theaters worldwide, which I agree with. Tenet is a movie that is fascinating because the more you watch it, the more you like it. By the way, that wasn't in the article. That was me opining. It's a tricky situation. Without a doubt, there are arguments on both sides of the equation. Nonetheless, personally, I believe Willem Dafoe does have a point with all of this. Maybe streaming platforms are, perhaps unintentionally, moving away from producing simple, more formulaic movies. But at the same time, I also believe the theater experience is changing as well. Superhero movies and uninspired sequels or prequels of existing franchises, thank God, do not dominate the box office as they used to. For instance, in 2023, we saw a completely original and very challenging film, Oppenheimer, make absurd amounts of money at the box office. By the way, like a movie like The Social Network, which I think is one of the most rewatchable movies ever made, so is Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer is like watching a great symphony, but you're watching it instead of listening to it. Sure, at the moment, a film like Oppenheimer is an outlier, an exception. It might be very difficult to replicate such success again, maybe even impossible, but it did happen. It proved a lot of people are willing and interested to watch challenging films at the cinema that the Joe Coys and the Logan Pauls of the world couldn't bother to finish. The question is, could we ever see a challenging film intended solely for Netflix perform as well in the future? We've seen the likes of TV shows like Succession become mega hits. Can we expect the same thing for movies intended for streaming platforms? Or is Netflix just making us dumber? Please, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you stand. So again, the link to this article is in the description. I would say this. Never, obviously, here's what I would say. This is my personal opinion, okay? Like I need to say that after 924 episodes of this show. But I would say this, that when you're watching something like Succession, or you're watching House of the Dragon, or you're watching Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad, the cinema of it all is not as important as the story that's being told. It's like a novel. You're reading, and I think the very best streaming TV shows are basically like the very best airport novels. Novels you buy at an airport, maybe you're flying for 3 or 4 hours, you open them up, they grab you immediately. Gone Girl was one of those novels. Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl. I knew that book. I don't know if I read about it in Entertainment Weekly or something. I heard it was good. I got it, sat down, devoured the book in like 2 sittings. Andy Weir's, my God, it said they're making a movie with Ryan Gosling. When I read Project Hail Mary, read it in one fucking sitting, man. That book, you pick it up and like, no one, I couldn't tear me away from that book. Those books, Project Hail Mary, I understand, it's a first contact story. That book is fucking delicious. Your brain, when you read Project Hail Mary, like when you read Gone Girl, your brain feels like you've bitten into the literary equivalent of a great tiramisu or a creme brulee or whatever your favorite dessert is. I was cooking, I was boiling crab. I love crab. I grew up in Seattle. I love crab. Elizabeth's like, what is this? It stinks so bad in the kitchen. I'm like, oh my God, you have no understanding of how good this is. For me, I love crab. Whether it's Dungeness crab, king crab, snow crab, I don't care. Give me crab. I'll eat it. It's so good. Elizabeth doesn't appreciate it. She grew up in Ohio. What does she know? But anyway, not to disparage my girlfriend or anything like that, because she's great. However, when you eat crab, if you understand, it's that delicious. When you read a book, it's that delicious. You can't can you really taste how delicious something is just on TV? Because the story of it is great, but is the cinema of it great? Can you look at, like, I would say to this, let me pause at this. I say this all the time. Only one person's ever taken me up on this. I always talk about my love of Michelangelo Antonioni's Ennui trilogy, La Notte, La Ventura, and The Eclipse. Now, I would ask you, I don't think, or if you want to go the sci-fi route, Tarkovsky's Solaris or The Sacrifice. I would say that those movies, both Antonioni's movies, or even Truffaut and Godard's stuff, Jules Jim, or The 400 Blows, or even La Dolce Vita, famous foreign films from the 50s, 60s, Roma, Rome, Open City, not Roma, it's a different movie. I don't think those movies work on streaming. Before I met Elizabeth, I was dating this girl named Jocelyn, and our first movie date, she lives in New York, and she works for Christie's, the auction house, and she's a curator of their photography department. And when I first met her, she's a friend of a friend, and the first date, I took her to see Last Year at Marienbad. I know, I don't even want to get into it. I love this movie. If you don't know Last Year at Marienbad, look it up. Go see it. I own it. But we got to go see it at the ArcLight. And I figured she would dig it because as a photography curator and all that. And she did. That movie does not work on streaming. You cannot. Now, you could sit there and, you can actually watch it. And you could watch Last Year at Marienbad on streaming if you wanted to. But honestly, because we're trained to expect a certain thing at home, we're expected to have narrative that we're following. I don't think you could watch a film and call it more the cinema. The idea of storytelling is different than I think the idea of what cinema is. And Michelangelo Antonioni's Ennui trilogy, La Notte, La Ventura, The Eclipse, and Last Year at Marienbad, or those kinds of films, they do not work at home. Now, you can watch them and you can enjoy them, but the power of those movies will not permeate your soul the way they would, say, to audiences of the late 50s, early 60s, or the late 60s. They don't work. Call them art films, call them what you want, because we have an expectation from television, which is narrative-based. It's not cinema. The image is not as important as the story. So the idea, and I'll tell you something, you're never going to get anyone in any corporate boardroom to understand this. If you're going to go pitch this, you're never going to win. It's not even an, I wouldn't even, there's no way, if someone brought me into a studio, if David Zaslav called me up tomorrow and said, Rob, I've been watching your YouTube show and I've decided you should come in and we're interested in making anything you want to make. If I were to go in to David Zaslav and start talking about La Notte or talking about La Ventura or Last Year at Marienbad or La Dolce Vita or whatever, I wouldn't get the job. I wouldn't get the gig. It wouldn't happen. If I started talking about, well, let me just tell you, David, this movie's going to be about cinema. There's going to be no dialogue, and it's going to be all the images, and people are going to be mesmerized by the gigantic IMAX images I'm going to give you. He'd look at me like, get the fuck out of here. He'd call his secretary, like, beep. Whatever secret button he has to have the powers that be come in and take people out of his office, I'd get that in about, 2 minutes. And I understand that. We don't live in that world. I get it. But I will always believe, and so does Christopher Nolan, and so does Quentin Tarantino, as much as I love watching House of the Dragon, I know what I'm getting, and it's a beautifully cinematic show. I'm not saying shows aren't cinematic, because it's beautifully shot, it looks terrific and all that, but it's all narrative-based. But when you go to the movies, the images are equally as important as the story you're watching. You can watch a film if there's no dialogue for 20 minutes. You can still be mesmerized. The cinematography, the imagery you're presented with will ensorcel you. I've said that twice. I've used that word twice today now. John Campy even called me out. He said, "You use the word ensorcel," but that's what it does. It's like it's magic, like Cyrus and the Warriors. Magic. What do you know about Cyrus? Magic. Whole lot of magic. You guys got to get that 4K because it is a fucking banger. But anyway, I'm telling you, that's what cinema is. I mean, the opening credits of Superman the movie. Dun 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 dun. Dun. We watch those because you're sitting there. When I saw that shit at the John Dance Theater in Bellevue, Washington, I want to say I saw it in 70. It was just fucking huge. And Bryan Singer talks about this in the documentary I made about Superman Returns. That's on the Blu-ray. I wish they'd release it on 4K. It is amazing when you're watching those for 5 fucking minutes. Reading those, there's no story going on. You're just watching words going, and it's awesome. Those Superman the movie credits, John Williams score, pure cinema. You're like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. And then when you see the S, dun, 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 dun. I mean, come on. I mean, I was there in 1978. I was 11. I know everyone's like, Rob, I was born 30 years before that. I know. I get it. But I'm telling you, it was awesome. It was awesome. I just don't think that the theatrical experience, I don't want it to go away. And I think that a great Oppenheimer and Barbie, people now think it's a meme, it's memeable, Barbenheimer, but I'll tell you something. Both Oppenheimer and yes, Barbie provided theatrical experiences that you cannot duplicate on TV. Yes, you can watch those movies, certainly, but they do not permeate your soul. And I know it's funny to say this, but Barbie, the production design, the fact that Greta Gerwig made it so theatrical, you know, you're watching a very stylized environment. When you see Barbie, and everyone who saw it on a big screen can attest to this, when you see that on a big screen, it's way different than watching it. And I own the Blu-ray or the 4K. I've watched it at home too. It's a different experience. And Oppenheimer and Barbie delivered in the theater experiences for the first time you cannot duplicate at home with a regular. I got in my media room, I've got a 65-inch OLED. It's tweaked. It's bright. My friend Clark might say it's too bright. I like it bright because, but I've tweaked it within an inch of its life. You can't beat the theatrical experience. You can't. Movie theaters will always make movies more valuable. A great theatrical run makes it more valuable, and the experience cannot be duplicated at home. And if we get rid of that experience, we will all be diminished. I'm a huge fan of big, giant theaters. AMC invested billions of dollars to make sure that they had the Dolby cinemas. Their stock price is down, but I'll tell you something. And Aaron, come on, dude. You got to make that shit work. AMC invested in great presentation. I mean, for fuck's sake, I went and saw The Batman. By the way, shot by Greg Fraser, who you can see me interview on John Campy's channel on The Last Designing Hollywood. Ellen Mirage-Dink and Greg Fraser. It's sad. I wish more people watch these interviews because we get some amazing people on these shows. But Greg Fraser shot The Batman. Best use of the volume. I mean, he knows what to do. Greg Fraser shot Rogue One. He shot The Batman, Dune 1 and Dune 2. And he shot The Creator. And he's a good bloke, too. And you can watch the interview I did with him. It's almost 90 minutes. Check it out. But I do think that the theatrical experience, have I belabored this point enough? Are you like, Rob, we get it. Go to the theater. Cinema is that experience. And it all, anyway. Let's see what you all have to say, shall we? Let's jump back into where are we, ladies and gentlemen? boys and girls, I'm gonna see where we're at because there's a lot of people who have a lot to say. Let me go back here. Isaac Cushman sends in a super chat and says, "Just booked my ticket to see Poor Things at noon tomorrow. Looks like it'll be just me in the theater. Kinda hope it stays that way. Love Lanthimos, but he doesn't make movies for mixed company." Laugh out loud. Isaac, you're gonna love Poor Things. You're gonna love it. It's so stylized and so sexy and so crazy and weird. You're gonna dig it. I promise you. Jay Bling, Amazon is finally making a new erotic thriller after supposedly abandoning their plans to make more. It's called Follow and will star Diego Boneta. Look, let's bring the erotic thriller back because, my God, our visions of sexuality are so skewed by internet porn and OnlyFans. Let's bring back eroticism. By the way, you know what eroticism brings into it? The finesse game. You have to know how to kiss. You have to know how to touch your partner. You need to know making love well is a skill. I'm just saying. I mean, I've been told that. But I'd love to see the erotic thriller make a comeback. Ryan sends is that 50 euros? My God. Ryan, thank you so much. Now, what does Ryan say? I appreciate you supporting the channel. Ryan says, "I remember as an 8-year-old waiting in line for a Return of the Jedi that went around the block. I remember the excitement. I remember my uncle running off to the 7-Eleven for refreshments while we waited. Streaming can't replicate that." Ryan, first of all, thank you for supporting the channel that way. And goddamn, son, you nailed it. I mean, that kind of, by the way, that was 41 years. In May, it'll be 41 years since Jedi came out. I was there, man. I was 16. And it's true. I mean, and I have to tell you, man, the most excited that I've been for movies, this might seem cliche, was to see Infinity War and Endgame. I went and saw, it was me, John Schnepp, Amy Dallin. We went to the El Capitan Theater in downtown Hollywood across from the Chinese and saw Infinity War. And I have to say, I mean, it was the closest thing you could come to sex sitting in a movie theater with hundreds of other people. I mean, it was so exciting. We were so excited. John Schnepp and I, God, I miss that guy. He's been gone for 6 years. I don't think I've ever had as much fun sitting next to somebody as I had sitting next to John Schnepp watching Infinity War. I know it's not Hugo Weaving's voice, but when we heard the Red Skull in the background, oh my God. We were looking at each other, oh my God. And then Endgame, I saw Endgame with John Campia. We went to the Disney lot, and it was fun. A lot of the movie pundits there, but we weren't. Maybe it was because we're on the Disney lot and people had to have a sense of decorum and all that. But my God, it was incredible. It was incredible. Again, I would not have wanted to watch Infinity War and Endgame on TV for the first time with that build-up and that work. Oh, man. But you're right, Ryan. That anticipation. By the way, it can still exist. I've seen it around Top Gun Maverick. People have that kind of, if the buildup is there and people have that excitement. I mean, Barbenheimer, the fact that people dressed up and want to see both movies, we saw a little bit of that. But here's the thing about both Barbie. I am not a person. I think Barbie delivered an incredible cinematic experience. The colors alone, and yeah, is it the fact that it's an IP, it's a toy company's IP and all that. That movie deserves a lot more credit than I think it gets. I know it was Warner Brothers' biggest grossing movie ever, but as a cinematic experience in the theater, Greta Gerwig directed the hell out of that. But that production design and all the colors and all that, the fact that they went theatrical with it, it's pretty great. And when you see it on a theater screen, again, you take it in more. And of course, Oppenheimer, I don't have to sing the praises of that. It was amazing. It was amazing. MK Solid 82 says, I remember when Tower Records was open until midnight, fully stocked with CDs, movies, and toys. Today we have nothing. There's nowhere to go. You know, that's absolutely true. And I have an old fashioned here. I've been drinking it, but here it is. Let's drink to Tower Records. And by the way, let's also drink, to those of you who know, to the Virgin Megastore. These are really good. How can I get these Knob Creek old fashions? They have enough liquor in them. These are like, you know, you can get them. These are on sale for $5 for New Year's Eve. They're expensive, like $14, but worth it. Just saying. But yeah, I mean, this is a true story. I ran into Ray Bradbury once at the Tower Records here in LA on Sunset Boulevard, which is kind of by the way, Colin Hanks' documentary, I think it's called This Too Shall Pass, about the whole history of Tower Records. I cannot recommend it enough. I grew up going to Tower. When I got a car, I went to Tower Records on Mercer Street in downtown Seattle every week. I went through there. I was buying 12 inches out of the import section, import CDs, laser discs. I mean, they were great. You'd go there and it was a cornucopia. It was all physical media. It was discs, tapes, CDs, vinyl. And you'd go in there and you'd run into people. I talked to Ray Bradbury for 2 hours in Tower Records once. Living in LA, you ran into everybody. Went to Tower Records. Everybody went to the Virgin Megastore. I'd go, and they had a bookstore. I mean, Tower Books. They had Tower Books later, but I'd buy books. I would go when I was married and I was rich. I was making a lot of money in the aughts doing DVD special editions. I could go drop $1,000 at the Virgin Megastore. I'd come back with books and CDs and movies, and it was great. I'm not that way anymore. Now I'm Poe, but relatively speaking. But it was a great time. And that was another thing. Everybody that was there, the people that were there at Tower, they were all imagination connoisseurs. They were there for specific things. And you didn't go into Tower. Nobody walked into Tower and like bought one thing and left. You went to Tower to sit there and rifle through the stacks to just look at stuff, even though you looked at it 1,000 times before. Like I used to look at things that I knew that they were there for like years because no one bought them. I mean, I miss those days, man. We're never going to get them back. Blazing Agent says, Rob, was your dad Richard Burton? I can see the resemblance. He was not. You're both rugged gentlemen. Have a good night, sir. Well, thank you, Blazing Agent. No, I was adopted. I was adopted by Richard and Nancy Burnett, so I didn't meet my biological mother till I was 29. And she was a redhead. I'm like, oh, that's why. It was a little crazy, but yeah. So my dad was a really great guy, a really great guy. Peter Cunnington says HBO has made some very challenging movies for streaming. One about Dr. Kevorkian, but they also started making movies before streaming when HBO was cable. It's true, and you know what? John Frankenheimer. Like he made Up Against the Wall, there was a lot of great movies made for HBO, but even though they were made directly for HBO, I still don't think watching them at home, it's not the same. They're not the same thing. You know, again, you have to go to the theater. By the way, let me just give it up for Coach Sipping Jamba Juice. You want to buy a Tower Records, Eduardo? Okay, let's talk about probably one of the most rewatchable movies ever. Say it with me now. The Social Network. One of my favorite movies ever. You have to buy the Columbia Pictures box set. I think it's in the first one, right? It's up there to get the 4K. God damn, I love that movie. And by the way, why does Eduardo Saverin want to get rid of Brenda Song? As soon as she set something on fire, I'm like, don't get rid of her. Man, she's hot. I know, her and Macaulay Culkin. I know I'm an old man. It's like, don't get weird. I get it. But in that movie, Eduardo Saverin, come on, man. I love The Social Network. You want to buy a Tower Records, Eduardo? Good on you, Coach sipping Jamba Juice. You know what's up. 1001 Johnny sends in a tip and says, I do agree, Rob, about the theatrical experience. As you may remember, I've been having a personal celebration of the 15th anniversary of Garen Lagann. Second film, All the Lights in the Sky Are Stars. I'm very much looking forward to this Thursday. 1001 Johnny is he's our man who I want to call him the man in Japan, even though he's not in Japan, but he certainly knows his Asian sci-fi, especially Japanese anime, Ultraman, everything Ultraman, the entire Ultraverse. They should hire him. Netflix should hire him. I mean, One Piece was successful, and Shin Ultraman. Let's do another Ultraman reboot, and 1001 Johnny should deal with it. Oh my God! Look who it is! Our old friend Claudius, one of my favorite people in the world. He married well, and he has a great son, and he has a lot of Star Wars toys, and I think he believes in UFOs or UAPs. Claudia says, "Hola, Rob." To paraphrase a great YouTuber, I know the industry has no inherent right to cinema and cineplexes. The industry has to earn it. Anyone been to the theater lately? The museums? It's true. Claudius, you make a good point. But okay. It's a different thing. It's a different thing. Theater, people still go to the theater, but again, it's different. Movies were the greatest form of storytelling ever devised by humankind. They were the art form of the 20th century. They changed the world. I love museums. I do. But museums aren't as exciting. Museums are preserving a way of life. Like, remember, before we had photography, the only way to preserve a moment in time was through a painting. That was it. You look at the great frescoes, you go to see those giant paintings in the museums you go to Florence, it's different. Dirty Rez sends in his first, I don't want to say there, Dirty Reds 76 sends in their first super chat. So Claudius, I don't know. Anyone been to the theater lately? The museums? A lot of people go to the theater and the museums. They're still here, and we still need them. We do. How have you been, by the way? Please give my best to your wife and your son. I miss you. I do. Kenneth Colton says, today I was listening to the 1996 Fear soundtrack. Fear, the Mark Wahlberg movie with Willem Peterson? Soundtrack theme by Carter Burwell, and it reminded me of when my mom rented that film when I was 13. Now I'm 40. Wow. Really? Really? That's crazy, man. That is really crazy. I don't even know what to say about that. That's nutty. But anyway, kids, so funny between Claudius and you want to buy Tower Records, Eduardo? You guys are the best. This audience, by the way, is the best. Peter Cunnington says, I say porn movies work better at home. Okay. Yes, but porn movies, pornography, which, who's not to love pornography? We have more pornography. We're drowning in pornography. But I would say that the point of pornography is a tool that's supposed to elicit something else. You're not supposed to, if you're just sitting down and watching a pornographic film for 2 hours, I think that movie will have failed. Although it's really interesting because you can go back and watch porn films, as I like to call it, bush porn. The bush porn of the 70s, some of it has really interesting, there's Radley Metzger, a.k.a. Henry Paris. If you want to go back and watch some interesting sexually explicit, not as sexually explicit, not as mechanical or as explicit now, but certainly X-rated. if you go back and you watch movies like Radley Metzger's The Licorice Quartet or The Score or The Image, they're sexually explicit, but the stories are interesting. The movies, you can watch them as cinema, especially The Licorice Quartet. But Camille 2000. 1001 Johnny says, I fear you've missed an earlier tip of mine. No, I haven't gotten through everything. Sheriff Carl sends in a tip. My boy from the PNW. Sheriff Carl says, life is tough. Sticks and stones. We can either build bridges together despite our differences, or we can keep playing into the foolishness of social tribalism and destroy it all. There's a difference of being high on the fence and high on the horse shit. I totally agree. That's why you know what? I feel like people from the Pacific Northwest, if you're from Seattle, you grew up in Seattle, I find that there's nobody I get along with better and more immediately than people from the PNW. That's why I really hope I can make my Seattle-based movie this year. 1001 Johnny says, Rob, I'm sorry to make this joke at perhaps an inopportune time, but I greatly disagree that you have yet to have watched Ultraman Blazer, and I accept the opportunity to debate you on why you must correct this shortcoming of yours. Thanks for being you. No one loves Ultraman more than 1001 Johnny. No one does. And you should love Ultraman as well. So no, I'll get there. You know, it just takes time. It takes time. Actually, to be honest, I do have a letter. You know, I read letters. This is interesting. John Chilton writes, Alec Peters discussion show. For those of you who don't know, I was involved with a Star Trek fan film called Axanar. We did a great short film called Prelude to Axanar. We were going to make a feature film. We raised a lot of money. You can read all about it. But the impresario about Alec Peters is just turned out to be a litigious asshole who everybody who ever did great work for him turned on us all. But whatever. Yeah, it's water under the bridge. But John Chilton wants to know about it. John says, Robert, fascinating and wholly informative discussion about the funny dealings of Alec Peters. Of course, he was going to get the video pulled. I did a video with the Eisner Award-winning Paul Jenkins. We both are involved with Alec Peters. He's been suing us. Paul Jenkins has been in lawsuits with him for years. Alec sued me twice. Sued me knowingly in a jurisdiction I was never in just to cost me money. So that's what that's all about. But you can watch. There's a Robservations with Paul Jenkins. I've done Robservations about Axanar. I've also put up videos, Axanar Origins, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. You can see what I was trying to do with the Axanar feature film. You can watch them. I hope they're informative. You can see that I was actually doing the work. Robert, fascinating and wholly informative discussion about the funny dealings of Alec Peters. Of course he was going to get the video pulled down. He did. He claimed copyright over it. And he threatened me. He said, if you dispute my copyright claim, I will haul you into federal court. That's what he said. I disputed the copyright claim, and his copyright claim was denied. My video was reinstated, and he didn't haul me into federal court. I mean, what a wannabe. Alec Peters is such a wannabe. He's always been a wannabe. I do the actual work, though. So, anyway. I got halfway through your video and I had to pause to celebrate Christmas. I went to watch the rest today and it's been removed due to a copyright claim by Axanar Productions. No surprise, I would suggest. Yes, but I disputed it and YouTube put it back up. Firstly, excellent reporting. However, many Axanar contributors most likely didn't get to watch it. Can you edit out the in-contention Axanar stuff and re-upload the video? I think it's really important you push back here. The man is obviously as mean and nasty as he is corrupt. I really appreciate your work. I'm an Australian, same age as yourself, and our youthful years were filled with the same influences, from authors to movies to TV shows, though I think I may adore Space 1999 a little more than you. You can't see them from where I'm sitting, but I don't know if you can see that. I have lots of Eagle transporters in this room. I'm just saying. I always find your shows, reflections, and observations enjoyable. Thank you for your effort and your entertainment. John. P.S. Any chance you could chat about any Trek gossip, perhaps the inside word from Terry Metalis in regards to Legacy? Also, could you speculatively talk about the possible sale of Paramount and how that could hopefully affect Kurtzman Trek's era's future? Do you think we'll ever see good Star Trek again? Well, first of all, thank you for writing all the way from Australia. I love Australia. I lived there for a year working on Superman Returns. There was a report about Star Trek Legacy. Terry Metalis says there was no truth to that. I don't know. Good Star Trek. The problem is, as Alex Kurtzman has said, that we're using Star Trek to deliver whatever message. I don't know why people think they have a message to deliver. Great stories have an inherent message. Great stories have messages built in. But why do creators today think that I've got a message I have to deliver? I don't get that. It's so weird. I always believe in. I always have faith at the heart, that we will get great stories. I mean, Star Trek Picard Season 3 I thought was really, really good. I really loved it. We will get great Star Trek again. Once we have people that understand or even know Star Trek. So, we'll see. I really love Andor. I think Andor is great Star Wars. By the way, before I end this show, I want to give a shout out to the actor David Image. This is him. Here he is playing Flyboy, affectionately known as Flyboy, Steven, one of the four main characters of George Romero's superlative Dawn of the Dead, one of my favorite films of all time. He passed away, and in my mind, actually, I don't know if you can see, but wait, I have a 1/12 scale action figure of him right here. His Flyboy character is right there, next to the helicopter zombie here. Those are, I know, 1/12 scale action figures. People are like, what? Those are Mezco figures. That was in the Dawn of the Dead 2-pack. And if you're wanting, that's Alex DeLarge from Clockwork Orange. He delivered the single greatest performance anyone's ever given as a zombie. David Image in Dawn of the Dead has passed away. And I just want to say, Dawn of the Dead was the very first bootleg videotape I ever owned. in 1980. Thank you, Bud Warner and Steve Pitcher. You changed my life, the two of you guys. I don't know if you're still alive. I hope Steve is. He shouldn't be that old. But you two guys, Bud gave me Dawn of the Dead. He got me Dawn of the Dead before it was ever out on Thorny and my home video. So I want to give a shout out to David Image. I love Dawn of the Dead, and he was one of the four. And I was lucky. The first movie I ever worked on, Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Ken Foray, who played Peter, the black SWAT officer. You ain't just in here by yourself, boy. He's the best. It was so exciting to meet him on that movie because I'd seen Dawn of the Dead 100 times. But shout out. Here's cheers to David Image. So, it's funny when you watch people. My favorite movies that I watch 100 times, when someone dies, the Star Trek cast, when Leonard Nimoy died, it hit me really hard because I'd been to his house, I'd talked to him. But it's always strange when somebody leaves this mortal coil that you've watched so many times, even if they're only in one movie that you've seen them in. He's been in a few other movies, but when they're gone, you feel diminished. You can't help it. And I never met him. I only know him from films, but because they never age, they just exist as that character forever. And even though he turned into a zombie and died, the greatest, by the way, one of the greatest zombies of all time. What a performance. You think that they're never going to be gone. And then one day you read that they are. But since I saw Dawn of the Dead in the theater at the UA 70 on the corner of 6th and Blanchard in downtown Seattle in 1979, that my dad lied to the ticket taker, said my mom was inside. She was not. I saw Dawn of the Dead by myself. My dad went to work and picked me up after the movie was over. Thank you, Dick Burnett. My dad was an amazing guy, and he always made sure that I saw the movies I wanted to see, including Phantasm and, as I said earlier, Escape from New York. So anyway, Jason Webster sends in a $20 super chat and says, I remember when I saw Star Wars at the Forum Cinema, sitting in the theater with the smell of a freshly cleaned cinema, the aroma of fresh popcorn, the buzz of the audience. Then, when the John Williams theme started, wow. Jason, I was right there with you. I saw Star Wars opening weekend. Now, I asked this to other people. One of the things that I remember about seeing Star Wars for the first time, it opened on May 25th. I saw it, I want to say that was a Wednesday. I saw it on the Sunday of opening weekend. The thing that struck me the most, not just that my mind was open and it was a wondrous experience, there was something I'd never heard before. And I keep talking about this. I feel I talk about it every other day, but it was in the theater when the crawl started. You know, Star Wars and the crawl. I heard this for the first time. I never heard this before since. It is a period of civil war, rebel spaceships striking from main base. It was everybody reading the crawl, and I don't know but it was like, psst, it was a weird cacophony. It was all around me. It sounded like cicadas or something in the summer, and I'd never heard that sound before. And, you know, it was everybody reading the crawl. And they didn't even know people didn't even know they were saying it aloud. Custodian of the stolen plans. It was amazing. Anyway, I'm going to end this show. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting this channel via Super Chats and tips. Those of you who are members of the channel, or become members, we have our member chats bi-weekly. We're going to have a member chat this weekend starting at 11 a.m. So, yeah. And join us, as the Evil Dead would say. It's a lot of fun. And this was a fun show. So I want to thank all of you for being here. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm not in the John Campea show tomorrow. I'm actually recording another Designing Hollywood. I would encourage everyone to go to the John Campea channel, look at the last two Designing Hollywoods. One, Greg Fraser, the director of photography of the upcoming Dune 2, and also Ellen Moroznik, who I interviewed at Universal Studios in their costume department. She did movies like, Fatal Attraction, Wall Street, Basic Instinct, Starship Troopers, Ridley Scott's Black Rain, and she recently did that movie Oppenheimer. And maybe, just maybe, she'll be nominated for an Oscar tomorrow. She's one of my favorite people in the world, one of my favorite people I met in the business. I love her to death, and she's so immensely talented. And cross your fingers, who you got tomorrow. It's going to be really interesting to see who gets nominated for the Oscars. I think it's a great year. I'm really excited for it. I hope you are. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to everybody, have a better night.